Hey guys, Colby here. Welcome to another Racial Legends video. Guys, today we don't have a plat push video for you guys to see since I simply did not wake up to push for plat in the morning. I had a day off and just decided to sleep in. So, top 10 champions that remove buff for you guys to see. Let's see what an actual top 10 champion does. We've got Madame Series in here. I'll just show you why you need a buff remover, a buff stripper in your team, and Madame Series is one of the top 10, and you'll see why. So you find an enemy team in the arena with all these big shields. You don't know what to do. Those shields actually just help the enemy team survive way longer. You need the remove so you can go in there with your nuker, with your enemy, with your champion, so that you can damage your enemies. So let's go and see what actual top 10 buff stripper does. So let's go. Madame Series takes her turn. She removes everything. There we go. Defense down, attack down, apply. That's why she's top 10. And then we go in there with our damage dealer, and that's it. It's done. Easy way to actually farm your points in the arena. So let's go over the top 10 in this category. So obviously with the showcase of Madame Series in the beginning, we had to go over Madame Series. I think she is the top champion currently in the arena to use against most of the teams. There's some situation where you should use some other champions, but I think Madame Series is a fantastic champion, and the simple reason is that she does provide a double benefit in her removal of buffs. She also applies a decreased attack and a decreased defense debuff on all enemies for 2 turns with her A3, the removal of buffs. This cooldown is now reduced to 4 turns if you fully book it, but it's so important to have Madame Series in your team. Some players also get a second Madame Series so they can gear her differently than their main Madame Series, and that's more end game arena strategies that they follow. So definitely Madame Series deserves the top first position in my opinion. I think there might be close contenders and I'll go over them in a bit, but the reason also that she gets the top 1 is because she's much easier to get, being a void epic. When you do have those 2x on voids, then it's much easier to get an epic rather than just getting a legendary, either void legendary or just a normal legendary out of ancients or sacreds. Next up in the list, guys, is Princechymer. I think he deserves a top 2, and in some situations he does deserve top 3. The reason being, he does have a diverse kit, which each of his skills does something very different to all his other skills. He doesn't have like a theme. Well, I just kicked the microphone. He doesn't have like a theme in doing everything. He basically can do a lot of things, and one of them is actually removing buffs. His A2 attacks all enemies, 3 turns cooldown when booked, removes all buffs, and then it places a sleep debuff for 1 turn. So if you have him with high accuracy, you're not only removing buffs, but also placing that sleep debuff, which does help you. Well, basically, you let the enemy team take a turn. They lose that turn. It's not like a stun. You can't attack them while the sleep buff debuff is on. If the sleep debuff is on and you attack, you'll still do the damage, but if you don't manage to kill them, they'll actually take a turn because they'll be brought back from sleep. The reason he is in the top 2 is also because of his other skills, being the reset cooldown skill, and also he has a fantastic lead in the arena. In the case you do not have an arbiter there, you can actually use Princechymer instead. Third champion in the list, in the top 10 category, guys, is of course Sethalia. Sethalia is a fantastic champion. If you do manage to get her for removal of buffs, she's a contender in the top 3, and in certain situations you'd rather use Sethalia instead of, say, Madame Series or Princechymer, of course depending on what you have. But Sethalia is fantastic, and we'll go over and see why. So she does have a 100% chance when fully booked, so you need the books to also have her at full effectiveness. 100% chance when booked to remove all buffs from all enemies, then decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 10% and fills the turn meter of all allies by 10%. So this is like a triple benefit in this skill. You remove the buffs, you remove some turn meter, and you buff your own team. So it definitely helps when you think you will be a little bit slower than your enemies. Then it decreases the turn meters of all enemies by 20% and fills the turn meters of all allies by 20% if 5 or more buffs were removed. So, and depending on the enemy team and how many buffs they have on them, then this benefit is actually doubled. So that's why she gets the top 3 position. And in the cases where you think you have the damage to take down the enemy, you don't need the defense down from Madame Series. You don't need to sleep them, but you do need to get them to just reduce their turn meter, let my team get a turn. Then Sethalia can be the top one that you use in your team. The top 3 that I just mentioned, guys, I think is a very close contender with each other, and in certain situations you should use one or the other, and you should justify the use of each one depending on the enemy team. So you do not always go and use Madame Series or Princechymer or Sethalia. Next up, guys, we do have Gurgo, the Ogre. He is another great champion to use in the arena. In the case you don't have any of the other mentioned champions, well, I don't think you won't have Madame Series in the case you've got a Gurgo, because that means you've opened a ton of void shards. Gurgo is a void legendary, much harder to get, and if you do get him, guys, do not be disappointed, but just be surprised, because this champion has not only a buff removal, but also a 100% chance to freeze the enemies. And when he does, finish all this animation, he also gets an extra turn. So this, instead of a 4 turns, becomes a 3 turns cooldown, since he grants an extra turn to himself. And you can do either your A1 with that extra turn, which is a just a double hitting attack, and if you do have that evil eye mastery, you'll also be reducing the turn meter of the enemy that you hit with your A1, or you can either choose to go with your A3 and just go in there for a big attack. The reason that I like Gurgo is because of that buff removal and also the freeze mechanic that he does apply. He's very similar to what Princechymer provides to the team, but in the case you've got Gurgo, you can actually use him instead. Next up, guys, we've got Rian the Conjurer. Ryan? It's not Ryan, but Rian the Conjurer. She is a champion. She is a champion that can be, you can acquire it through the Doom Tower only. So if you are a person who is finishing the Doom Tower, then you will have access to Rian eventually with those clearings. She is an epic support champion, so booking her out is much easier. She has a buff removal, so 100% chance when fully booked, 3 turns cooldown to remove buffs from all enemies, and then you will also apply the weaken debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. The weaken, it's so great, but it's not as strong as, let's say, applying a defense down. The reason she is in the top 10 category is because she can be eventually acquired for basically free by just completing the Doom Tower. It will take a long time to complete the Doom Tower, but eventually, even if you are the most unlucky person in the whole of raid, you will get this champion and you will have access to a buff remover and debuff application with just a single skill. Next up, guys, we've got Suzerain Canton. In the case you don't have any of the other legendaries mentioned, then don't be surprised on why you should use Suzerain Canton. Suzerain Canton is one of the champions now in the list that doesn't really deserve to be in the top 5, in my opinion, just because of the way that he removes buffs is not as the others. He does not remove every single buff that there is, but he does remove shields, block damage, and unkillable buffs. Especially shields are the strongest ones that the enemy team might have. Of course, attack up buffs and defense up buffs are also annoying to find in an enemy team, so removing those is also essential, but usually it's shields which cause the most amount of issues to a team. The great thing about Suzerain is the final part of his skill. So the buff removal cannot be blocked or resisted. This means that you can run a Suzerain Canton with absolutely 0 gear. So he is very free to play friendly. In the case you want to use something like this in the arena, you're having issues with enemy teams with big shields, you use Suzerain Canton and then your life is much easier, just because of that the buff removal cannot be blocked or resisted. I just love this guy and the way he works. I don't have him personally on my account, and I wish I did so I can do some more creative teams for the arena. Next up, we've got Ray. Ray is a fantastic champion. She not only has big nukes, but she also has buff removal in her kit. Her A3 attacks all enemies, removes all buffs, 50% chance of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn. This goes all the way to 70% chance. You can even take it to 75% chance, but that's not needed. This skill is just fantastic. 6 turns cooldown, way longer than other skills, so her use with this is very limited in terms of using this. Let's say in dungeons, it's going to take a long while for this to come back and remove those buffs from the enemies, but she still gets a great spot in this because she does provide also a big nuke in case you want to have both the buff removal and also nukes in your team, so you don't really worry about the enemies resistance, but you do want to have that buff removal in your arsenal. The reason that I say resistance is because Ray is a nuking champion, attack based champion. You want her there for those big damage potential. You will not be usually going for accuracy substats. If you do go for accuracy substats, then you're missing out on critical rate, critical damage, and attack percent that would benefit Ray in being that big nuker. But if you want to go in kind of a different route and use her as a buff remover, then yes, you can use her and then use some other champion to be your nuker. She deserves a top 10 slot in this top 10 video. Next up in the list, guys, we've got Yannick. Yannick is another champion that does remove some buffs, but not the whole buffs of the team. And the reason that I do like her is because she is an attack based champion, so she can provide a nuke. And the nuke that she provides is also based on what buffs she removes. So the way that you use Yannick is you go first with this A2 attacks by an enemy, places a perfect Veil buff on this champion for 3 turns if this attack is critical. So she does need to get a critical hit going, then grants an extra turn. So you get your extra turn. What you do with that, you go with your A3 attacks all enemies, will ignore shield buffs. So this is just a great nuke that removes shield buffs from targets if this champion is under a Veil buff or a perfect Veil buff, then deals extra damage equal to 15% of the value of removed shield buff. So if you've got an enemy team with heavy shields, we're talking like a Krisk with a shield set, and then maybe a Mountain King with a big shield set as well, then those shields will provide you another benefit to that big burst that you want to have. So Yannick, being a spirit champion, can actually help against those Mountain Kings that can't really be taken down with a Trunda if you do get those weak hits. Next up, of course, is Chancellor Jasmine, a recent addition to the champion pool. The amount of champions that we have is just increasing by the day, guys. 50% chance of removing all buffs from enemies. This goes all the way to 75% chance. This is the reason she is way low in my list, because this is not a 100% chance, but still a 75% chance is pretty good. And then she also places a sleep debuff for 1 turn on all enemies who have active buffs. So in the case you don't manage to remove those buffs, then you will be applying a sleep debuff on them. Of course, being the enemy doesn't have an immunity set on, and that will basically block you from applying that sleep debuff. Nevertheless, she does deserve, I think, a top 10 just because of the amount of buffs that she can remove at a good amount of chance, and also the fact that she can apply a sleep debuff in the case she doesn't do what she's supposed to be doing. And finally, guys, Seer. I bet that you thought I forgot about Seer. Seer is not a champion to forget in terms of buff removal. She deserves, honestly, she deserves a top position in all dungeon, Doom Tower content, any kind of PvE content that requires you to remove buffs. Seer is the top one by far. There's no other champion that does this job better than her. She not only removes the enemy team's buffs, but she removes your own team's buffs. So she is double the menace in terms of buff removal. She is a fantastic champion. She's not the 10th in the list by any means possible, but I just wanted to give a special shout out to her. She's a fantastic champion. She brings in the fastest teams in both dungeons, but also she can be used in arena. She can be used in the Doom Tower. That's the one I used to clear out the hard Doom Tower. A very good Seer with a good supporting team can clear all the way to stage 120 in the hard Doom Tower. Once you get her, you know that you can be using her for all the time being. But the biggest issue with Seer is actually providing a big support behind her. So it's not only based on what the enemy team has in terms of buffs, but it's also what your own team can provide to Seer, because she needs a great amount of buffs to bring in big damage, even if you got heavy end game, you know, team with buffs and gear on your Seer. So removes all buffs from all enemies and then attacks all enemies. Damage increase according to the number of removed buffs. 50% chance of placing a sleep debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. The chance of placing sleep debuff increased by 5% for each buff removed. Inflicts less damage to bosses. This goes to 4 turns cooldown. Fantastic champion. Definitely not the 10th in the list, as I said before. Definitely top 1 in PvE content, and she can also be used in PvP content, but not so much as a nuker, but more so as a buff remover. But be very careful, because she will be removing buffs from your own team as well. So if you're depending on them being maybe critical rate up or critical damage up to get that damage going with your actual nuker, then Seer will be removing those and you will be missing that benefit. So think before you do that. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you haven't subscribed already, be kind and do give me that favor of just clicking the subscribe button and the like button while you're at it. Thank you guys for watching, and guys, I'll see you in the next one. See ya.